Hello and welcome to Hunter's Gathering. I'm your host, Markeia McCarty, and for this episode, we will be doing a deep dive into Alice is Missing. Alice is Missing is a silent RPG made by Hunter's Entertainment. We have the creator with us, Spenser Starke. He's responsible for other games such as Icarus. I know that you probably love that as much as I do. So, yes, Spenser, thank you for coming to the show and doing this deep dive with us today.
Yeah, of course. I'm so glad to be here. How are you?
Oh, I'm so good. I'm ready
Yeah.
to get like down and nerdy with you when it comes to Alice is Missing. For anyone who isn't aware, we for Hunters Entertainment for Gen Con online, we did Alice is Missing, and
For the
it
first time ever, anywhere.
and it killed. It was so good, so
Thank
emotional,
you.
so moving, and just like okay, I could keep on nerding out about it, or we could just like start
Let's
talking
dive
about
into it. Yeah.
it. Yeah. So Spenser, in your own words, go ahead and tell us about Alice is Missing and
Yeah.
some of your motivations behind it.
Yeah, so Alice is Missing is a silent role-playing game about the disappearance of a high school junior named Alice Briarwood in the small Northern California town of Silent Falls. And during the game, you use your phones to send text messages to each other as you unearth clues and sort of discover the secrets behind this sort of conspiracy of where Alice went. And by the end of the game, you sort of have this climactic resolution as to, what happened to Alice. Yeah, and heavily inspired by Life is Strange, by Oxenfree. Sort of feels like one of those like indie emotional games. I think the soundtrack very much. We'll talk about that in just a second, but the soundtrack very much comes from that kind of place and is heavily inspired by that kind of genre. It's a weird genre, right? Because it's sort of like just like the indie emotional genre. It doesn't really have like a set kind of, it's not like a sci-fi or fantasy or whatever. It's just kind of this weird modern, modern feeling indie darling kind
Yeah.
of genre. So anyway, that's sort of where I see it fitting.
Yeah, if anything, I find it incredibly relatable because
Cool,
we've
good.
either been there, like existed in that place, or we are existing in the place right now.
Kind of, yeah.
Like
Yeah,
quarantine in general, or it's a place that we recognize and that we've seen other people go to, like that
yeah,
emotional depth. So yeah, but since you mentioned the playlist, let's start with that because this
sure.
emotional playlist that is played with the timer and everything along with Alice is Missing. Please tell us about this. And also, how long did it take you to put together this playlist? There's a lot of emotions. That's like a roller coaster that's
Yeah.
going on with this.
So I come from a like film and TV background, so especially from a writing background, and so a lot of the game work that I do, whether it's Icarus or Kids on Brooms or Alice is Missing, a lot of that is informed for me by by like a cinematic genre, right? And one of the things about that you'll notice is this sort of a through line between Icarus and Alice is that it's it has different acts to it in a sense. Like Icarus is much more clear because it's like the cracks in our facade, the rifts between us, the final hours. It's clearly a 3-act structure. With Alice, it's a little more hidden. But it's also not. You have a 90-minute timer, so that plays out like a 90-minute movie. So my goal originally, when I started designing the game, I knew that I wanted to make it a really intimate and like emotional experience. And for me, the best way to do that is to limit the amount of time that you're playing the game because you want people to be able to invest emotionally. And if they know that it's going to be a long session, they know
Mhm.
it's going to be 3 hours, 4 hours, they feel less inclined, at least in my experience, to give themselves emotionally to it because it's exhausting, right? So I knew I had to sort of get it into so originally it was 60 minutes, and then it ended up extending into 90 after the very first playtest. We're like, no, this has to be 90 minutes. It just has to be. It feels right. But during that process, I know I have 90 minutes of story that's going to happen, And the cards themselves, if you sort of dissect them from a, at a meta level, like you'll see how they kind of ramp up and they have different story beats that happen no matter what the, which one of the three time cards you get, whether it's the 60 or the 70 or the 30 or whatever it is, whichever of those three options you get, you'll see they have a through line in that they ramp up the action just a little more, or they poke at this other area of the story that feels very much like what we'd see in a movie. For example, the 45-minute card, we'll go into examples, but like the 45-minute card is the midpoint. So everything that happens at the 45-minute section evolves the story in a dramatic way. And so by doing that, by creating these sort of tent poles, right? That we know, like the beginning of the game has has a tent pole, and then you have sort of an action that happens at a certain point, and that's a tent pole. By doing that story structure and reinforcing that using cards, what I was able to do is come at the timer with that same sort of mindset, because stories are all about ebb and flow, right? If you're just at one level the whole time in the story, it can feel too much. And so the goal here was to create this sort of sine wave, this up and down emotional journey. And so the music was my main way of guiding that in tandem with the cards. So if you if you listen to the playlist, watch the playlist, and you see the cards that come out at those times, you'll see sort of at a meta level how, I'm taking the songs that are much more high intensity or have, a big buildup that happen, and I'm placing them in strategic places so that they complement what's happening roughly in the scenes that are occurring in those moments, especially near the end, right? Like it ramps up crazy near the
Yes,
end.
it does.
And then you get that dropout for just a moment. And there's like this moment, there's like this lull, and then it builds back up. So sort of, knowing how stories flow, like that was the main thing in going into the playlist. I had to capture like a film score. I had to capture the emotional arcs that were happening. And the biggest challenge there was that it had to be exactly 90 minutes of music. So it was me just like scouring everywhere I could to find music that was licensable, that we could use for the game, and match the tone, but also fit like 3 minutes and 26 seconds, right, to fill that hole that I needed.
Oh,
So
man. Yes, well, the work paid off. It
good. I'm
definitely
so
did.
glad.
Definitely did. As someone that was actually like a player in it and like experienced that with like the intensity, where when you first start off with it, you feel like, oh, 90 minutes. Oh, that's actually a pretty long time. I don't know if
Yeah.
I can. And then you start getting to it like, wait, what? We only have how much time?
I know it's like 30 minutes left, and you're like, wait,
Yeah.
where did the other 60 minutes go?
You're
Yeah.
like, I didn't even tell my secret yet. It's
I
just like,
know.
like, well, I've got to put this out now. So
Right. Well, and I do want to flag too. I have the list up here of the music, but one of the biggest, one of the most exciting parts about it for me is that we got a couple of tracks from Message to Bears, and Message to Bears is not only one of my favorite. Musicians. His name's Jerome. He's awesome. He's just like the nicest dude. But his music was actually in Life is Strange, and it's what I was listening to while I was building the game. And so we're able to license a couple of tracks from him that I really feel like capture the magic of what I was what I was imagining when I was designing. So shout out to them. Go check them out if you haven't heard their music. If you like Alice, you'll love Message to Bears. It is like all that kind of music.
oh, nice. And
Yeah,
I'm really glad that you were able to get some of their music
I
too. That's
know.
I mean, for
Wild.
something to be an inspiration, then also be able to utilize it within your project.
Yeah.
Yes.
Dream
Oh,
come
yes.
true, truly. So
Yeah. Oh, and just like real quick, our Twitch chat, we have new emotes and they are going nuts with them. I love it. Uh,
awesome.
so yeah,
I'll have to go back and watch it. Yeah.
yes. Okay, so let's get into the nitty gritty of Alice is Missing. Let's go over these cards. Let's hear these motivations. Let's go over this artwork. Because one of the
Yeah.
things with with Alice is Missing, also another fun fact for everybody out there that's watching right now, was 100% backed on Kickstarter after 3 hours. So that says a
Blew my
lot.
mind. Blew my mind.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. And so far the VOD has just been out for a little bit. It's already been viewed over 800
800
times.
times.
So yeah. So let's go ahead and jump in. What can you describe what we're seeing here with roll 20 with this backdrop with Silent Fall?
Sure. Yeah. So this is sort of the main splash art of the game, done by Julian Gripe, who's just a phenomenal artist. It's funny because, as a designer, you like walk into a deal with a publisher and you're like you want to make sure that everything is, as you envisioned it, and one of the biggest challenges there, right, is capturing like the feel artistically of what the game is supposed to be. And so turning over that kind of thing to an artist I didn't know at the time, and being like, hope she comes back with something that, it really captures the game. um, I was just absolutely blown away when we got this artwork back. It was just, it's just a stunning piece of art by her. So shout out to her
Awesome.
for that. But what we're seeing here is this is just a mock-up that I've done of a roll 20 kind of screen. When you actually play the game in roll 20, you won't have something like this. This is just made for our presentation here, but you will have this backdrop on a lot of the screens that you're using to play. So if we want to, I can first sort of pull up the intro card, pull that out onto the screen if we want.
But just real quick before we,
Sure.
if you want to put that up there, but
Yeah.
you keep on saying about roll 20 and that what we see here might not necessarily be what they will see when they are doing
Yeah.
roll 20. But don't you have like a three-part series that you made for GMs that are looking to convert their Alice is Missing on roll 20? Can you tell us
Yeah.
about that, and we'll try to drop the link in the chat as well.
Totally. So, actually, in this project right now, JB, I don't know if it'd mess you up, but I could flip through those screens to sort of show what the actual Alice is Missing Roll 20 setup looks like, especially the gameplay screen. Probably give you a good idea, and you probably saw it in the VOD actually, or in the live play actually. We showed it for a little bit, but on yeah, basically, I like built the whole sort of structure in Roll 20 the best way, like in the way that I run it. And so I recorded a three-part series that hopefully we'll be able to drop into chat, that runs you through how to set up the game before your players get there. So like, or even before that, even before you like set a game to happen with your players, how to log in, make sure everything's set, organize your cards so that you know what to pass your players. Um, and then the next video is like, once your players are in roll 20, how do you take them through every step of character creation and world creation, and then into the actual gameplay scene itself. And then the third video is simply just a reset video, because once you've had all those cards everywhere and like you have decks that have been emptied and all these kinds of things, it is a little bit of a it's a short but like important process to make sure everything is reset, so that you are next time you go to play, you don't have any issues. JB said it's cool if I flip through, so I'm just going to jump to the gameplay screen really quick just to kind of show you. There's these kinds of layouts. Oh wait, you can't see it right now.
Yeah.
There we go. Okay, you should be able to see that now. Can you see that?
Well, I see it,
Okay, cool.
and I think
Cool.
yes, I see it.
Great. So yes, you can see like these kinds of layouts are what we have set up for the game, so that you're able to kind of place cards on the screen in the appropriate places, and like you have sort of guidance by the system itself to how you should set things up, and just to make it easier on you. But yeah, we've basically created a nice big screen here so that you're able to look at the cards a little closer, because I know during the VOD we didn't have the chance to like really zoom into the cards and look at what they
Yes.
are, and I didn't have the chance to, we were moving kind of fast to get the gameplay going, but this is an opportunity for us to actually do a deep dive into what they
Yes,
say and how
we
they
are
how
getting
they
to
work.
it. I love the artwork on the back of this, like the intro card.
Yeah.
It's dark. I love having that full moon, this wintry landscape. This is
So
gorgeous.
interesting thing about this card is that this image, an image that's very close to this, something that was then repurposed by our artist to kind of like make something that felt a little more Alice. There wasn't any snow in it. The colors were slightly different. The trees were slightly different. But this kind of image was the very first image I pulled for Alice ever. It was like it was this card and that song from Message to Bears combining on my screen, that like created Alice in the very beginning. So yes, this was definitely like
Nice.
the biggest inspiration piece at the start of the process. So yeah, keeping it here, being able to have this here as like the beginning card is really sort of a metaphor for me, right? Of like this is how the whole game began.
Yeah,
Um, should
wonderful.
should I flip it so we can see it?
Yes,
Okay, cool.
please.
So basically, at the beginning of the game, you are reading this prompt for your players, so that we have some dogs playing in the living room. Oh my god,
Oh,
they're
puppy
so
cam,
cute. Puppy
puppers.
plays. They have the zoomies right now. Oh my god. Um, uh, so in the beginning of the game, you're reading this aloud to the rest of your players, and it sort of sets the tone and feel of the game, and also gives you a background as to what the common shared like not language but like vision is, right, for everybody. Like how does this place feel? How does it look? What's the context for Alice's disappearance? And you'll see at the bottom here, after we read this sort of setup, it says pull a missing person poster. So in person, when we play it, that would be your cue to be able to pull an Alice poster, which I can do. And so you'd have something like this come out where you're able to get your Alice for the game that we played, the VOD that everybody saw, or the live play that we did. We already had our Alice pulled because we set up our characters beforehand, which is what's recommended if you're doing online play. Is that you're pulling one of these, and there's a setup screen. I'll actually flip to it really quick so you can see it. There's like an introduction setup screen here where like you have a place for the missing person poster and the intro card to go.
Wow.
So you're pulling these before the game even begins to set up, but you have all these options of different Alices that come out.
I
Again,
really, really enjoy that there's different options for Alice's.
yeah,
That makes a big difference because Alice is more like an icon,
yeah,
an archetype, if you will, and being able to have these different choices, just like the expressions, the ethnicities. It's like just looking at them, you can start building your own backstory of how you are connected to
yeah.
this particular Alice. And I really appreciate that that was something that y'all focused on with
Thanks.
yeah.
Yeah, it was definitely something that was, Alice rarely shows up in the game. We had Alice show up in our game for a very brief amount of time, but Alice is usually this like enigmatic figure, right? Like all of us care about her deeply, but she very rarely makes any sort of appearance. So this poster is really at the start of the game, the thing that allows all of us to latch on to a shared vision of who Alice is in a, at least in a physical sense, until we start to describe who she is, and what she's like. But having that shared vision, I thought was really important, and also making sure that that you have a variety of different types of Alices that can come out, and and you can base your game around them, because no matter what the Alice looks like, no matter what kind of what hair color they are, what ethnicity they are, like we always feel a connection to them, and so it gives you sort of this empathetic thing, right? Where like Alice could be any of these people, and I think that's really important.
Yes. I
So
love that because each and every one of them just feel they already feel like they have all this history behind them.
yeah, yeah, and Julian again did all this artwork for the for each of these portraits, and it was just so cool to see each of those come to life in their life.
Yes. Oh, nice. Oh, and then also want to tell the chat room that if you have questions, go ahead
Yes.
and let us know with that, and JB can like kick that over to us. Our technical director is working behind the scenes right now. Okay, so great. So that's the introduction and also missing person posters about various
Yeah,
Alice's.
I will hide those. Should we go to character cards?
Sure,
Okay,
let's go.
cool. We're gonna pull up the ones that we played because we have personal experience with those. Let me pull up Evan, and
Oh,
I'll
ooh, let's see this
pull up
background.
Charlie. Oh,
I did this for character cards. Tell me what was the thought process behind this? I love that it's a silhouette, by the
yeah,
way. You
good.
know,
Yeah, and it's a sort of a, you can't tell who they are necessarily based on. That's the hardest thing with games like this, right? Is that like I want to create um I want to make it quick enough that you're able to set up the game uh, without without a lot of hiccups, without a lot of time. And in doing that, it created archetypes and names and questions for each of these characters. That it's a little more focused than you might find in another game. But you also want to leave it open enough that these people could be anybody, which I think is important to the replayability, right? Like you want to create at least a vague. You want to give people enough direction that they aren't lost, but not so much direction that they feel like there is a specific way to play that character. And so the back of these character cards were important for us to like find something that made them feel modern, which is where the cell phone kind of comes in. Originally, I think I had a silo. I'm trying to remember what I had. I don't remember what I had for the original character cards, but like it wasn't this. This was something that I think Caleb came up with, our art director, to sort of tie it in, bring it into something that felt more modern, which is why they're holding the cell phone. They sort of have this like chat bubble that's on the back, and then a school backpack, which sort of grounds it in the age that most of the characters are. So really trying to just get across that. The sense for the tone and feel of the game before you even know what character you're playing.
Nice. We do have a question from the chat from
Sure.
Double Forte. Were there any features you wanted to include but had to end up cutting for speed or efficiency?
It went through a lot of oh, big bark. He's very angry. There were a number of things here and there that came up. Um, uh, I'm trying to think about if there's anything in specific that was totally cut out. The one thing I will say, it isn't a feature necessarily, but I had a sixth character that was, I think it was the childhood friend, and that might be if and when we're able to do kind of an expansion pack on the game, if that's something that ends up happening. That would be something that I might include in there. But I had a sixth character because originally the game had like could go up to six players, and we
Mm.
played it that way. And we're like, this is madness. Way too many people, way too many. Like I mean, you saw like keeping track of that group chat with five is bonkers. Uh,
Yeah. I've
so
noticed with
yeah,
people's responses on our Discord and
yeah,
in other places where they're just like, yeah, I just have to like pause or
focus it.
just follow one character.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. You really have to follow one or two characters' perspectives and then go back and rewatch it because that's the only way to really keep it straight in your head, I think, unless you're like incredibly talented at watching multiple things at once, unless your brain can do that, which mine cannot. But
Hey,
in
that would be a great way to find out that's your superpower.
I know, right? It'd be a very interesting superpower, but I like it. Specifically for Alice is Missing. But yeah, specifically for being an audience member in Alice is Missing. And I do want to touch on something really quick that was fascinating from that stream, because I went back and watched it a couple of times. And that's my first time being able to watch everybody play the game at once. Every other time I'm just playing me, right? And what was fascinating about it is that it's almost its own experience watching it than playing it. Like you and I played in it, so we had that very singular sort of vision. But watching it play out on five screens all at once and being able to bounce around, like it almost felt like a totally different experience for me watching it than playing it, which was fascinating because having played it a lot, I've never seen it like that. It's like whole different perspective. Um, but but
Yeah,
but
speaking of
yeah,
our
but there were
characters.
originally six players.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh,
so originally we had another character. Yeah.
oh,
Oh,
excellent. Thank you for the question, Double Forte. And
yeah.
then
Thank you.
also, not always weak. Yes, we all want to see the pupper. If it happens
Oh.
organically, it'll happen.
But yeah, originally there was a sixth character, so that was sort of that's the only thing that I think really, if there's something else, I'll flag it if I remember it. But that was the main thing, like a whole character got cut to streamline the game. So, but yeah,
Okay. Yeah. All right. So, yeah. Speaking of our characters, I played Evan Hallwell, and you played
this
Charlie
one,
Barnes, the
yeah,
facilitator. Let's start with Charlie Barnes first. If
sure,
you can, yeah, tell us about this. Break this down for us. What this means,
sure.
and then also what Charlie means to the game as a whole.
Yeah. So
Mhm.
so on character cards, you have four main sections. You have the character name and the archetype. You have their background, which is the information you're going to share at the beginning of the game, that sort of helps to set up who Alice is and her relationship to you in some way. You have your secret, which is somebody was asking, I think on the YouTube video for the setup for this, and then also in the Discord, like the secrets. they were saying the character cards are all open on the screen and the secrets are there. How do we keep that from like becoming a problem with players? And I just want to address like that point, which is that the secret that's listed here is a question. It doesn't really matter if somebody sees the question because the the part that's the secret is the answer, right? So like this is a question, this is a prompt for you that you're going to answer on your own that's going to create the secret for your game. So it's okay if people see these secrets. And then the voicemail prompt, which is the voicemail that plays at the end of the game, sort of just a light prompt for you to have inspiration to feed that. And Charlie obviously is the character that I played and is the role that the facilitator often plays during the game. It's the default, I should say, for the facilitator. Having played a lot of these games, there just for playtesting, I've played other characters before as the facilitator, and it was totally fine. When I'm playing with a new group, I tend to play as Charlie, and that's why I made it default because they start the game, so it feels like they're leading the sort of experience. And also Charlie is the only one who has a set sort of background. And I did that for two reasons. You'll hear me talk about it in the stream. But it's basically like they have a background about them having moved away from Silent Falls, they're coming back for a break. Their parents divorced. They're coming back for a break to stay with their dad, and they're hoping to see everybody while they're here. And the reason why that's created that way is because they're coming into the game as a sort of out of loop character, so that everybody else. Oh, hey Hannah, hey Hannah. They're like going crazy. Can you grab them? Sorry, we're having dog play matches happening, wrestling fights in the middle of our kitchen floor. Yeah. So like at the beginning of the game, they're the one who comes in is like, I don't know what's happening. Can you tell me? And that does what I think a good facilitator does in a game, which is make sure the other characters are getting moments to shine by asking them questions. And so Charlie, as the facilitator character, is coming into the game and asking, what happened? What do you know? Right. So that sort of is a like meta level of facilitating that makes them the ideal one to be a facilitator. But if you've played it before, you have another person who's played it before, or somebody who's super comfortable with the game, has read it, you can always play another character as the facilitator if you want to.
Okay. Well, that does lead into another question that we have from the chat
Sure.
from Sly 1516. How do you keep the game fresh after playing it so much?
Yeah. So this game is not designed to be played, and I note this in the manual too. It's not designed to be played like week after week, right, with the same group. Like that's not the format or style of this game. This is like an event style game. This is like, you get together with a group of your friends, and you're going to go on this adventure for 90 minutes and then leave these characters behind. But having played it so many times, I've never had a game that is identical or even close to identical. Different things happen every time, and there is always something surprising that just like comes out of left field at me. And a lot of that comes from players having the prompts put in their hand, having different locations or suspects come out in um, uh, sort of like tandem with the prompts, and we'll get there when we get to the clue cards. But when you have a variety of these locations and suspects that come out and partner with these clue cards, and then you also have the player who's taking that information and interpreting it and creating their own story out of it, it can go anywhere. And so I really think that that's where we sort of find our stride in the replayability, is like looking at the player creativity. Just for an example, if you are on our Discord, plug for the Discord, come join our Discord.
Always
If
join our
you're
community.
if you're on our Discord, there's actually an Alice is Missing Stories channel, and so people have posted some of the stories they've already had
Ooh,
with
nice.
Alice, and you'll see if you watch the like live stream and then you read some of those stories, they're all wildly different. That being said, I do think that there's validity to playing this game, having that experience, and then putting it away for a little bit and coming back to it later when you sort of, are able to either, if you are playing with the same group, have fresh eyes, have new ideas, or are just emotionally ready to come back to it, because it can be a little intense.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. A little.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. No, it can. Yeah, it can definitely.
You can attest.
Yes.
Yeah,
Right. Yeah, because like with mine, I was Evan Howell for
yeah,
our particular playthrough, the one with the crush, which is like just for me, it kind of felt like, oh well, like instant outsider with
yes.
things, where it's just like the one with the crush just feels like, oh, this unrequited love. Oh, okay, let me dredge that up
Yep.
and have fun with it and play with it and get my fingers all wrinkly.
Yeah, yeah. And I think I might have said this in the debrief, but Evan, I think, is, for me, out of all the characters I've played, Evan is the hardest to play. Um, and so I commend you for your performance on it. Evan is oftentimes like the one who has to deal with the most amount of emotional. Evan and Julia often are the ones who deal with the most amount of emotional stuff, because Evan's doing this thing for somebody that whose love is sort of unrequited, and that is in itself sort of the greatest tragedy, right?
Yeah.
In a way, like it can be the greatest tragedy. And so yeah, really sort of huge commendment to you
Oh.
for being able to pull off that character so well. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's an intense one.
Yeah, I don't want to give away too much of what's already in the POD for people,
Sure.
but just like I had a semi what's the term to use?
Yeah.
Not I I didn't like the character. Like Evan didn't like them, but ended up respecting them.
Yes.
That kind of a thing where
Yes.
it was, yeah, but that we'll get into that when we get to our relationship
Sure.
cards.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, I like in particular with the backgrounds in here, a really good tool that is with this is that like each of these character cards having backgrounds, so everybody gets to build a piece of Alice. I
Yes.
really enjoy that. For mine, for instance, when it's like, tell us what rumor you've heard about Alice that you don't believe is true. I was that Alice was the one that started the fire in the chem lab,
Yeah.
and then that was a background piece,
Yeah, that actually came into play like
yeah.
significantly during the game, which was really cool. Um, but yeah, I mean that kind of thing, right? With tell us what rumor you've heard about Alice you don't believe is true, gives us a couple of things, and that's the goal with the background questions, are to give us a number of things to play with. What kind of teenager is Alice is very much like the facilitator question, right? Because it's like, okay, we're establishing our Alice in a very vague but uh, um, precise, not vague but precise, but what's the right word, like it's a very distinct choice that you're making, right?
Right.
It's not like you're defining her completely, but you're giving the group a direction to go. The rumor one here is very much about creating something that makes us question whether Alice was into something that was not entirely um what's the right word? What do you think the right word is here? Like, not wholesome, but you know what I mean? Like, it gives her a little
Maybe
bit of
just
an
real,
edge.
real.
Yeah,
Not everybody's all the way good or all the way bad. There's
yeah.
degrees of everything.
So that gives us a little bit of an insight into like what is something that we can play with Alice that might be a conflict that comes up later, and that's what we ran
Mhm.
into with our game.
Yeah.
Um, yeah,
Yeah,
totally.
and you've gone over a secret. Go ahead and
Yeah,
tell us about the voicemail. Like,
sure.
yeah, for in Alice is Missing, I found it to be the beautiful, heart striking note to then include these voicemails. So yeah, go ahead and tell us about that.
Yeah, well, the voicemail thing came straight from 10 Candles. If you know 10 Candles,
Yeah.
is unabashedly from 10
Mhm.
Candles. One of the things I really wanted to do with it, though, was to direct the voicemails a little more so that they weren't as open, because for setup I wanted. Oh, dog's still playing. For the specific like archetypes that we had, I felt like it was, to set up quickly, I wanted to give them some sort of prompt. So you'll see those prompts there, and those are so that you're able to get up and move quickly. But you'll see that they're informed by, if you read the manual, you'll see they're informed by your secret. So they also have some variance every time you record, in that like that is the context around why you're leaving the voicemail, but inside of that context is your own creative touch, right? Is your own like thing that you're adding to it that makes it different every time you play. And yeah, and so by by playing those at the very end, you'll notice if you listen to the soundtrack, the playlist, the very first song is also the very last song. And over that very last song, we play the voicemails, which are from before we knew that Alice was missing. So we're sort of creating this like bookend that happens using the music, but also using the voicemails to sort of go, let's look at where we came from. Let's reflect upon where we started and how it's changed, from where we are now. That was sort of the intention with them.
Okay. Well, we do also have a question about this from sorry if I mispronounce this, Madden16.
Yeah.
Why are the relationships part of the motive card? Can those combinations of motive and relationships be mixed in other ways?
Sure. So I didn't want to put them on the character cards because I wanted every time you played to have this variety of relationships. The relationships are informed a little bit by what kind of motive you have. It's not as clear right off the bat. It's not like if you have the find the blame motive. In fact, I'll pull. Are we cool to move to the motives? Is that okay? Can I pull those
Oh,
out?
yeah, let's go
Okay,
ahead.
cool. While we're talking about motives, I'll pull them out. Show these. So yeah, some of these I'll leave one on the
Ooh,
back
this
and one on the front. Yeah,
fire.
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 Uh, just to represent, like, it's a little bit more of the like emotional kind of card. I'll flip one of these so we can see it. Which one is this? Okay, so this is. Did you have this one? Who had this one?
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah, that was
wow.
yours. Look at
Yeah,
that.
this was mine. My
Perfect.
motive: anytime controversial or negative things are brought up about Alice, leap to her defense unconditionally.
Yeah,
And I
which
did
is
that
perfect for Evan
numerous
too.
times.
Yeah.
Yeah, numerous times in
Yeah.
After. Yeah.
So you'll see, like, there isn't it isn't a perfect straight line between what the motive is and what the relationships are, but I mixed them around a lot when I was doing play testing to find where the relationships that you had on your drive card fit best with the motive that you have. And so by sort of mixing those up and finding the ones where the person who has anytime controversial or negative things are brought up by Alice leaped to her defense unconditionally, by combining that with these relationships, it just seemed to sing the best when I played. And so it was just a lot of trial and error, rewriting relationships, trying different combinations of things. You could certainly flip them at some point if you wanted to, but there was a lot of like thought and playtesting put into figuring out how that motive sort of best feeds the relationships that you have and vice versa, right?
Yeah.
You can kind of see here, actually, I mean, it isn't a through line exactly, but like you've always been there for me is something that speaks to this person's like desire to have somebody that they're able to um, protect or that protects them, right? Because you're protecting Alice. So you have somebody else that's like sort of protecting you in a way or that's always been there for you. And then at the same time, Alice has forgiven you for something that I haven't. You're being defensive of Alice. And that relationship very much has to do with that as well. So you can kind of see, just based on this card, some of the like inner workings that are not as like apparent when you just look at the card, but that from playtesting really became like the core um, pieces of the game, right? Like how do the cogs fit together, and how do they fit together without being so apparent? That was my goal with it.
I like that. No, because it's like a motive is fueling your relationship with Alice, while the relationships there are fueling your relationship with the
Relationship with
other
everybody
people
else.
that you're playing with. Like one goes to one person and the other goes to somebody else,
Yep. Yep.
type of thing.
I just pulled up the motive for ask questions. Lots of them collect the details, push for answers, and find the truth. Alice is counting on you. You'll see the relationships here are I know how you really feel about Alice. Again, knowing something about somebody because you're always asking questions. And then we've never gotten along. Something that makes you a little more like because you're sort of prying into things, there's, the sense that like you could be bouncing off of somebody who doesn't really like that. So you could see how like they're sort of crafted by each other.
Yeah. Oh, and for any people that have watched the VOD already and are a little bit curious, for me, for the relationships, you've always been there for me. I believe I gave that to Julia.
Yeah.
And
Which is
Alice's
heartbreaking
wasn't. Yes. Right. Right.
to give that to Julie as Evan. Yeah. Great
Yeah.
choice. Like
Yeah.
A plus choice.
And then Alice has forgiven you for something, but I haven't. I gave that to Jack.
Yeah.
Yeah, Alice's older brother. So yeah, it was it was so many
But
layers. It was like
I
so
I
many
love
layers going on.
yeah, and my favorite thing is watching players sort of make those hard choices. Like, you had the chance to give that to anybody, but you gave it to Julia knowing Julia's archetype, right?
Yeah.
Because you
The
knew that
secret
it would
girlfriend.
create drama.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, secret girlfriend. Yeah, for anybody who doesn't know. So you knew that it would create a tension and a drama, and that's where the game lives. So, really neat to sort of like watch players decide to put themselves into those situations.
Yeah. Well, there's something with this game. You kind of want to make yourself vulnerable for it. It just you
Yeah.
kind of want to go that place. And we'll get into how you get back from that place when we get to that. But yeah, with this game, you kind of want to open yourself up to the vulnerability to explore it in a safe way.
Yes,
You know,
absolutely. That's the
obviously.
main thing, right? Allow us to be vulnerable, but allow us to also feel like we're always being safe in that vulnerability. So
Yes.
key.
Yeah. Okay. So
Well, I was gonna
yeah.
say with that, there was a question I just saw it pop up. How did you choose your safety tools in Aftercare?
Yes, that's
Are you
from,
okay if I talk about
Not Always Weak.
that?
If you wanted to
Yeah.
talk about that now, we can. I was gonna save that when we got to
Debrief.
the debrief card.
Let's do that. Yeah, yeah. Let's wait until
Yeah,
we get there. We'll come back.
yeah.
Okay,
But
cool. Well, let's
we
move
can
on. Yeah.
answer this question from, Meglin. Thank you for
Oh, great.
phonetically spelling that. Awesome of you. Meglin 16, how did you decide where to hold back on the rules design and let the players take over the game?
This is like the hardest part of game design, right? Like for me anyways, is like, when do I how do I create enough rules that people know how to play the game, but not so many that they get in the way? Uh, Luckily, I had experience with Icarus in creating prompts, and that's sort of where as a writer, right, like as somebody who loves to write, especially like film and TV and that kind of stuff, like the the idea of writer prompts come up a lot. um, and so I've read a lot of writer prompts when I have writer's block. And so capturing the essence of those, a really good writer's prompt gives you enough information that you can that you have context for what to write, but not so much that it informs you of the direction to take with it. Right, like enough that you're able to like build on top of it, but not be guided by it in a way that hinders you or forces you in a direction. So in that same way, I tried really hard to like, with the prompts and with the questions and these kinds of things, to create enough context to give people a inspiration, but not so much to give them direction. And finding that line with a game like this, where the core mechanic is flipping a card, right? Like that's the main mechanic in the game. Especially when you're playing, all you do is flip a card and read what it says and do what it says. Um, that is where that's where the mechanical substance and the playtesting difficulty really lives. Like, how do I hone those in just enough? Um, and to answer your question, like how do I decide? We play it a whole lot, see where people feel pigeonholed, feel where people feel like it's too open and don't know how to answer the question, and then adjust based on that.
Yeah, play test, and then play test some more.
So many, yeah, yeah, so
Yeah.
many of them, and then you play, and after you've done, do you think you play test enough? Then you play test it twice as much, right?
Having gotten my start, like even knowing about Hunters Entertainment, was because I joined in on Ivan's playtests for different games.
Yeah,
Yes, there's a lot of
a
playtests
lot
around.
of
You
play
probably have
test.
so many of your game design friends, like people out there that, when they invite you to a playtest, just go. Just go.
it
It's worth it.
It's funny. And a lot of books do this, but I credited in the book the very first set of playtesters that we had for the game, because they were walking into something that I didn't know if it would even work, if it was even something that like I was afraid it was going to fall apart completely halfway through, and everybody was like, "No, no, no, let's just do it. let's just go and do it. And if it falls apart, it's not the end of the world. And so playtesting and playtesters are so key to what we do. So thank you to everybody who comes out and does that for us. It truly makes the difference for everybody else who receives the game.
Yeah, and this kind of leads into this question that we got from Resback 390. It said, might there be anyone brought in to create in-game concepts, i.e., card prompts, etc., for settings or situations in other cultures, or for possible expansions?
Yeah. So, I mean, this is something that we've definitely held back on discussing too heavily until we saw uh, the way the game was received, right? Like
Right.
obviously the Kickstarter was way more successful than I ever imagined it would be, and I'm so thankful for the response. But the main thing is like once people have it in their hands, do they enjoy it? Will there be a call for more of these cards? And we're just starting to see the very first games trickle out.
Mhm.
And based on that, we've had really good responses. But it'll ultimately be up to hunters whether we're able to do expansions or do other sort of stories in the Alice framework, having cards that flip at certain times and these kinds of things like that, that are specifically like powered by Alice or whatever, like that will be up to them. But I will say I'm incredibly interested in doing that, and is something that is absolutely on my radar and stuff I've already thrown on paper. There are things I've already thrown on paper as ideas and places to take it, and I'm certainly not opposed to expanding outside of even my knowledge of culture and and setting and these kinds of things to be able to make this a bigger sort of property than it is, but ultimately again, like that's as the
Yeah,
designer I would
right.
love to make it happen, but it comes down to cost. It comes down to how many people are going to buy it, and so we'll see if there's demand for it. If you want it, tell hunters and maybe we'll make
Yeah,
it.
yeah, vote with your wallet type of
Yeah, vote with
type of
it.
deal.
Unfortunately, in this
Yeah,
capitalist society, that's how we do it.
it is literally that.
Uh-huh.
Okay, so let's get into suspect cards here.
Yeah, so I've pulled a couple
I
of them.
yeah, like this background where you have it's like they can't talk.
Yeah,
Like this with
yeah,
what's the thought process between with this? And oh, so snazzy. Look at this usual suspect
yeah.
snazzy card.
Well, it's funny because a lot of the designs here came from were inspired by art that I found originally for the game that was just placeholder. And one of the things I really liked about there was a piece of art that had this sort of tape over the mouth of a person, that it created this. Uh, it just felt mysterious in some way. It made them feel like they were, because they never speak during the game. You never really there are let me clarify. There are instances in which we get information from these characters that makes it feel like they're speaking, but they're never characters in the game that like interact with us on our text chains really.
Right.
And so by creating this back that sort of felt like they were like these people were mysterious and enigmatic and like not somebody that not a player character. They were NPCs, right? In a sense. um I was really hoping to capture that kind of feel, and I don't that the hard thing about art a lot of times is like you're trying to capture a feeling without being so on the nose, and I feel like this was where we landed with how to create the mystery and the apprehension and the sort of like um, hesitancy I have around these characters, because it's sort of disconcerting that they have their mouths covered. Like,
Mhm.
I don't know, creating that tension inside of you before you flip the card was
Yeah,
really, yeah,
it kind of feels like a I'll never tell type of a thing, where it's
yeah,
almost
yeah, yeah,
like
yeah,
it's
for sure.
their choice not to give you the info that you desperately need to be able to find your friend. That's the
They're
feeling that I'm getting
I love it. They're
from
holding back, and I never thought about it like that. There's a lot of choices that are made just based on instinct, right? Of like, why does this feel? I don't know why this feels right, but it feels right. And so for you to say that, like that told that, it's just funny. Like I'm still discovering things about why we put certain art certain places, but a lot of it just comes down to like what makes me feel that thing.
right.
So yeah,
Yeah, speaking of which, Ryan Groggins, who actually showed up in our
yeah,
VOD, yeah, the
it did show
ex-boyfriend.
up. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. This is iconic for an ex-boyfriend.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow. Well
So
done.
yeah, that was these are Caleb. Caleb did the art for these. I'm gonna flip. Oh, there's Bria too. So the goal with these originally, these were silhouettes as well. Originally, they were like profile silhouettes of characters in the playtest. And when we got into designing the the official art for them, um, I felt like the silhouettes. We had sort of a flag that the silhouettes felt too old. Some people felt like the silhouettes felt too old timey, which is totally valid. And so I was trying to step back and go, okay, we can kind of kill two birds with one stone with this, in that we get rid of the silhouettes, which make it feel less like a 1800s portrait, right? And but also the idea with the silhouettes was to not sort of define what the person looked like, but it still did define kind of what they look like, right? Like somebody who has super long hair and a very distinctly female presenting profile, is going to look different than somebody with short, spiky hair. And so you sort of like get this. You get an idea of what they look like just based on those silhouettes. And so we backed away from those and said, how can we create something that feels iconographic for these archetypes instead? So we landed on some of the things that you're seeing. So for Bria, it's like a locker that's punched in and says loser. Like that feels
Oh, it
very.
is punched in.
Yeah. You can see like it presents the idea of the archetype, but also doesn't give us a physical description of them in any way.
Mhm.
And so that was one of the keys as well to making this replayable. We wanted those characters to be able to take on different, different sort of different silhouettes and different, hair types and different skin types and different, like all these kinds of things. Like we wanted them to be variable so that they can change
Yeah.
every game.
I know for me personally,
Yeah.
when I pulled the suspect card of Bria, uh, with going off of this, the first thing that I focused on was, loser, but in particular that it was done in like almost perfect cursive. And I
Yeah.
was like, what kind of bully does like perfect cursive but calls you a loser on your own locker? And I was like,
Yeah.
this is a smart bully. This is, and then that's where my head went to
Right.
then get, this person that was stealing secrets,
Yeah.
kind of a thing, and then trying to slip like notes into Alice's locker. But it's like that's what worked for me
Yeah.
for
Yeah, and
focusing
we
on.
tried to create little things for people to grab onto on each of the cards. And then if we were to play this again, like if you and I were to be in a game again and we were to pick up Bria, we could very well just redefine Bria to be somebody totally different than that, because we've already gone that route. So like, you sort of have these like easy pulls for the first time you play of like, oh, we can latch onto this little piece, or like maybe somebody latches onto the busted locker and they're like, oh, this is somebody who's like, got held back twice and beats kids up, and like that's the kind. So we tried to present like these different options for people to grab onto in the cards, and then evolve out of there if and when they want to play, with those same cards again.
Yeah, because like it's near the top of the locker. Maybe they're really tall. Maybe these are really tall
Right.
lockers.
Yeah.
What really tall person can you think of as like can also be a bully?
Be able to
There's
write
so
that.
much
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then like with Ryan Groggins, yeah, for an ex-boyfriend, setting the photo on fire, not throwing it away,
Right.
not
Literally lighting on a fire. Yeah.
like, or just deleting it off a computer,
Yeah.
literally taking the time to hopefully go somewhere where it's fire safe and not just,
Yep. Dropping it in a school trash can. Yeah, for sure.
exactly.
And I
Oh
think
man.
I think there was also a discussion here too of like I wanted the game to feel modern, but I also wanted it to feel nostalgic in a way that like Life is Strange and Firewatch and Oxenfree all sort of capture that. Like it's very clearly like they have cell phones. We're in a modern era. People speak the way that we speak on a daily basis, but also feels oddly like anachronistic. For whatever reason, like if you play Life is Strange, they have Polaroids everywhere. Why do they have Polaroids everywhere? It evokes a
Polaroids are
certain.
making a comeback.
They are. It's true. Yeah, they're very hipster.
Yeah.
But it evokes a certain sort of nostalgia without really like setting it in a time past. And so I really wanted to try and capture that in the color palette. You'll see all the way through, the color palette is pretty muted, and and has a very, like, there are distinct choices made to make it feel like it's a little bit older, or it just feels more like, I don't know, it's hard to describe. It's
More
not even like a
vintage.
genre. Yeah,
It's
vintage.
vintage. It's
Right,
like
it's like vintage, but it's set in modern times. So anyway, there's a weird sort of like, a really cool dissonance there that I wanted to capture, and that I think that Caleb worked really, really hard
oh
to
yeah.
capture on these
Well,
cards. So
Caleb kills it.
Caleb's
Caleb
incredible.
kills everything.
Yeah,
Looking forward to one of these future hunters gatherings of having him on where he would be drawing and then I'm doing like dramatic narrative readings of some of the PDFs. So we have
yeah,
so many plans for hunters gathering
I
going
love
on.
it.
But what we're talking about does lead into one of the questions that we got from, and pardon me if I, Malians,
Uh-huh.
Malians. Phonetically spell it out for me if that isn't it.
Love it.
First, greetings from Brazil and congrats for the great game. Question. Was most of the history, was it created by you guys during the game session, like the lab explosion, the drug dealer, things like that? Oh, okay.
You can speak to this. I'll
Yeah,
let you talk
yeah,
for a little bit because I've been talking
definitely
for a
can.
long time.
Uh, for that was in game. That was
Yeah.
in game session where it was literally from the background of me setting forth that Alice, that there was a rumor about Alice that she had set fire in the chemistry lab, but I didn't believe that that was true. That put okay, fire and the chemistry lab on the table. And then later on, when we had Bria Brown as the bully, and I was saying, oh, she's putting like notes in Alice's locker and everything like that. And then with Ryan Groggins, and even with this picture with him setting this picture on fire, it's like fire's already on the table. And I
Yeah.
believe it was Mark who then was like, "Oh, Ryan's totally a drug dealer,"
So
kind of a
the
thing.
reason why Mark said that is because Mark and I had a conversation, because my secret was that she was selling Addie to be able to
Ah,
pay to get out of town. So
right.
that was that. So I had like the her. She was doing that, but she was not using, or she was telling me she wasn't using anymore, but
Mhm.
was selling it to try and like get herself out of the town, out of Silent Falls. And so then Mark and I had a conversation where that information got to him, and he found out that
Yeah. And then
Ryan,
Jack was
yeah,
just all about like, "Oh, he's a drug dealer."
yeah,
He's
yeah, yeah,
oh,
yeah,
that's my sister.
totally.
Yeah. So
So
to
then,
answer
yeah,
your question, Malians, that was in-game truth. Yeah, that got birthed out of our session,
that
like
just
all
all
together.
evolved.
The
Yeah,
energy and the back and forth with people, the text
that
conversation.
was the yes anding that happens during the game. That's really, really key.
Yes.
Um, I do want to pop back just for 2 seconds because I
Okay.
found the word and I couldn't find it. It's actually I think it's a Brazilian word, oddly enough. Um, or it's a Brazilian Portuguese word called saudade. And it's a deep emotional state of nostalgic or profound melancholic longing for an absent something or someone that one cares for and or loves. And it's a repressed knowledge that the object of longing might never be had again. And there's that, like,
Wow,
such an
that's
yeah, it's like Sodade
beautiful.
describes both happy and sad at the same time. um it's a memory of something with a desire for it. Like, all of that feels very much in line with the kind of feel that I wanted to go for with this. And so, yeah, so it's interesting to see, like, that's a word that isn't in English, but kind of I remembered, I remembered I found it, and I was like, that's the thing that I grabbed onto, that as like the tone that I wanted to capture. Ooh,
Yes,
that's loud.
and then we can all learn. We all just need to learn more languages, y'all.
I know, right?
Learn more languages. That's what we need.
Open up
As
our
we
vocabulary.
go to the location cards,
Sure.
I'm gonna answer Maglin 16's question. Where can we find people to play test our own personal games? Usually for me, a lot of playtests happen at conventions. Obviously, conventions aren't a thing that is a thing right now. I think on our Discord, and Alex Hillman, who is in the Twitch chat right now, could be very knowledgeable about saying this. I believe we have where people can meet up with each other, and if we don't, we should kind of have that so that people could do their play tests of our games, like to meet each other on our Discord. I feel like we would already have that, but if we don't, let's do that and help you find your play testers, out
Yeah.
of the community, people that want to volunteer for play testing and people that want to hold it.
I will say that. Oh,
Just
it's
for
on.
our games, though. Just for ours. Okay. Yeah. So if you want to play test more games, then
Yeah.
join our Discord for things like that. If you want to find people in your own realm, it for me, it's literally been just the people that I've been friends with already. Keeping in mind that a lot of my friends tend to be RPG players and game designers and every which way with that. I'm sure there's Facebook groups.
So
To
I was gonna say I've had the luxury of being able to be a part of a number of playtesting groups that are online. There are lots of Facebook groups you can join if you look up like game playtesting. Oh god, now they're going after Bones. Of course they're going after Bones. Uh,
There's dogs. Of course they're
I
going after
know, right?
bones.
It only does it right when I'm on. Like before this, they were completely sleeping, and now, of course, they're going wild. My wife is a saint and is chasing them around, grabbing them as they do this stuff. Uh, there are a number of things on Facebook, a number of groups on Facebook. If you look up like playtesting, game playtesting, RPG playtesting, there's also places like the Gauntlet that do a lot of playtesting. They do a lot of online play. If you're looking for something like that, that community is very story game oriented, but they do playtesting there. But yeah, just a number of subreddits too
Mm,
have playtesting availabilities. You can go on and like ask people to play test or whatever. Blind play testing is super key as well. It's the hardest thing to get is people just to like read the rules and give you feedback, but also really key. So
nice.
anyway,
So yeah, let's go into these location cards.
locations. Let's flip them. Let's flip one.
Hmm.
So the back, we wanted to capture something that felt, again, combining this like feel of an old time map, but also giving the modern feel of like a GPS marker, right?
Yeah.
So you see just in that card sort of the like, and I think this is the card that oddly enough we spent the longest time trying to figure out the back for. Originally it was just a little, it just felt like it was just a map of some kind, I think, and it
Mhm.
just felt a little too vague. There was no like there's no like focus point for it, and the team who worked on it can tell you I was absolutely relentless, and I feel like I feel bad that they had to deal with my entirely obsessive pickiness of these cards. But the reason why I had to be that way is because the actual like look and feel of the card, the way that the emotions that they drive in you, those are just as much mechanics in this game as like a stat modification would be in any sort of other game, or like or a stat itself is in a game. Like those are the key pieces to making people feel like they're in this game. So I was very, very particular in the way that I chose and had them design the pieces of the cards so that they would evoke certain feelings. So this was again combining that archaic with that new, finding the right, and then creating a central point on the card so your eye goes straight there.
Right. Oh my gosh. Yeah, I you can feel that because it's like
Good.
dropping a pin in it.
Yeah. And then for these locations, originally these were just, I mean, with the lighthouse here and the nightclub here, I was trying to think about like what.
They're invocative, Spencer. I'm gonna
Yeah.
say it because like
Good. I'm so
the
glad.
lighthouse on the howling sea cliffs, like right
Yes.
there. You can feel that lighthouse, like
Yeah.
how deserted it is out there with this spinning light. You can feel that. And then like the dripping dagger, that's a murder weapon. You put a murder weapon on top of a nightclub.
Yep. Uh-huh.
Nightclubs
Uh-huh.
alone are
I know.
sketchy. But you
Yeah,
put
for
a
sure.
dripping sword, like a knife on the top of it.
Yeah, for sure.
Like
Well, it's
already it like helps you come up with something for what's going on with this location. And like one, and I'm going to keep on tying it back to the VOD. One of the things that helps out
sure.
a lot that we found out, and that you were steering us with this really well, Spencer, is that when you're making up things that are true about the suspect and location cards, you still keep those separate. Like, you don't necessarily tie,
Tie
like,
them
for
together.
for instance, Bria Brown, the bully. You don't necessarily tie her to the Dripping Dagger nightclub, because you want all of the players to be able to access either the location or the suspect without having to have the two, like,
Yeah,
together to be
intertwined
able.
already.
Yeah.
Yeah, because they can come out in combination, in any combination. So when we're like doing our
Mhm.
starting hunches, very, making a very active effort to go, this is why Bria is suspicious and this is why the nightclub is suspicious, but not being like, well, Bria is suspicious because they saw her at the nightclub and that nightclub is seedy, right? Like by not tying those together. And I think the other thing we noted was that you want to make sure that it is information that could be accessible by all players. So it's not just, I think Becca at one point tied one of the barn. So like it was a spot that her and Alice went to that nobody else knew about. And I sort of like pushed her to give us a reason why the other characters might also suspect that barn,
Mhm.
because that card can come out for anybody. So
Yeah.
it's important that we have like, it's fine if that is truth, if what she's established already is truth. And that's something that I think as a facilitator is important to, like, when you're running this game, is important to remember, is like, if people come up with those truths, that's totally fine. And but allowing you to sort of then wrap around and go, okay, this is a spot that you go to. What else happens there that the other people might also know about that would make it suspicious? And you can have sort of a layered, thing there.
Yes.
And that same point, like there are some times we've played where somebody's secret that they have interacts with somebody else's secret, and it's this really interesting thing of like the perception of truth. Like, do why does somebody might believe that something is true and it's their secret, and somebody else might believe that something is true and that's their secret? How can those two things that might at the offset be contrary actually be both true, or both believe are true, something that Alice has told them or something that they've seen that they interpreted a certain way? Like, so it's all about creating, this messy truth around, around the infrastructure of the game. So
Yeah, absolutely. And then if there are things that are contradictions, that's where rumors come in, you know?
exactly.
Be
Yeah.
like, I heard, not to Umbrella Academy this or something. I heard a rumor that, Ryan Groggins is a drug dealer,
Right.
kind of a thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, that does lead in very nicely to the next question that we have from Maglin16. Why did you settle on these particular locations and those particular culprits?
Sure. I studied a ton of stuff that was in the genre that I wanted to capture. Um, I went through a lot of. It's noted in the back of the book, but there are a number of inspirations, and I'm sure there are more that sit. Somebody brought up that Twin Peaks wasn't noted, and that's something that totally could have been noted. That probably is floating around in my brain, but is not something that I actively studied for it, so it isn't in there. But like, looking at uh, these different pieces of media uh, that I took as inspiration for the game, and identifying the overlap between them, right?
Yeah, kind of like
They
these
can,
archetypes,
yeah,
like.
like a lighthouse is very clearly Life is Strange, and it's
Mhm.
so distinctly Life is Strange, but it also shows up in like a number of other pieces, like properties that you wouldn't think, like, that isn't so apparent, but like there are different. It's interesting because you see this overlap of locations and of types of people, right? The ex-boyfriend shows up in a lot of these types of stories of people that have gone missing. The creepy adult of some kind, right? Like the creeper, can
Mhm.
be somebody that is hanging around the school. It can be somebody that's in school with you. Like that archetype tends to exist in these kinds of stories. So it's very much about studying the genre, identifying the overlaps in those genres, and then playtesting them to see if they worked. The other thing that is tough, especially about locations, is that some cards require you to be able to, like, hear something from that location that tells you that that's where it is. Like you'll get a phone call. I don't know if we got the phone
Oh, yeah.
call in one of them, but like the locations also had to be something that reasonably would have some sort of sound that might associate with them that you'd be able to identify via a phone call.
Mhm.
So that was another sort of parameter, which is exactly why we have the lighthouse on the Howling Sea Cliffs. Because if somebody is struggling to find what that sound is, they go, oh, it's a howling sea. Okay, so the cliffs, we can hear the wind. I can hear that howling that only happens at the lighthouse. So by giving players these sort of like, you know, uh, minor, subtle, but important details about these places, you're allowing them to craft the narrative successfully via the cards. So
Very nice. Yeah, I would not go to this nightclub, by the way.
nope, me
I
neither.
just no, that's a nah for me, dog, on that one.
Should we
Yeah.
jump into searching cards?
Yeah. Okay. So
Okay.
so with the searching cards, what you were describing to me offline before is
Yeah.
that these are really to help like give you some more fuel for like your characters and like your inspiration of like the storyline because
Yeah.
it could get to that point. It didn't really happen in our game when we did for the VOD, but that doesn't mean it wouldn't happen where there might just be like a lull and then it's kind of like a oh okay, well I kind of want to go somewhere but I don't know where I want to go, or I feel like I should feel this certain way for this suspect, but I'm not certain what to do. And so you were saying that the searching cards were kind of a way to help you find that answer.
Yeah. So the searching cards, they fill a number of pieces that I think are important to fill in a game like this. That's pretty much dictated by the players, but also restricts the players' knowledge of things because you don't want to just make something up, right?
Mhm.
Because like there is a mystery that's happening and it's unraveling in a certain way, and so you have a level of agency when you flip over a card. And if a card goes, you know, uh, draw a location card, you go there in 8 minutes, you find X, that's great. And you're going to be able to go to the lighthouse and you find the journal that, you find something that Alice carries with her everywhere. What is it? And why do you think that she wouldn't have left it willingly? Something like that. That kind of thing is great because you're going to end up at the lighthouse. You know that you're going to the lighthouse. The card directs you to go there and it asks you what you find. And it might be the journal or it might be I think somebody had a bracelet
It's
or
like a
something.
keychain. I think it was a
Keychain. Yeah,
keychain in
that's what
our
it was.
game.
That popped up in our
Yeah.
game. So something like that might happen. But if you're playing Evan and you know that somebody left her at the train station and went home and she was there by herself and you want to save her, you might want to go to the train station as a character. And so if you do that, because the way the game plays out, during the playtest, we had players that would be like, my character would be gung ho, my character would go to that train station and search without having something to draw, something to get inspiration from. You'd show up there, you'd be like, hey, I'm headed there. And then what? Right? Because a card hasn't prompted you what to find. A card hasn't given you direction in that way. And so the searching cards are a way for you to go, I want to find something here so that I can sort of like feel like it's that location is important to the story because my character thinks it's important. So you can draw that kind of as a meta tool, like you were talking about, to like get inspiration for something that might be at that location. And it's very much like, you can draw one, and if you don't like what it is, you don't have to use it. And I advise that you only use maybe 2 of them, 3 of them max during the game, because they tend to be pretty big when they happen, and you don't want to like have things going all over the place. But yeah, let's flip them
Where
over and
you're
see what
doing
they
them like
are.
Uno cards, where it's just like, and now
Exactly.
this happens, and now
Exactly.
this.
Because it does. I mean, we didn't have any in our game because our game was moving so quickly. But every once in a while, there's a character who just wants to go do something. And I wanted to give them the option to do that. But yeah, then you'll have like, they're at that location. They pull the searching card. And then like suddenly there's a big kerfuffle at the train station and it pulls our attention away. And if you have that happening every 5 minutes, it can just be too much, right? It's a bunch of red herrings.
Yeah, and like keeping in mind that this is a small town, Silent Falls that everybody is part in.
Right.
I do enjoy here with like on the back of the card, you have a person searching with a flashlight, and then when you turn it over, it's literally what they were searching for
Yes.
is now lit up.
It's the silhouetted.
So
Yeah.
yeah, I very much enjoy that.
It's the silhouetted, or it's the opposite of the silhouette. It's like the spotlight. That's the word of
Yes.
what it is. So you can see here, like there's a couple of varying levels of things. So like a broken switchblade is like, that could be a big deal, or it could be nothing, right? A
Right.
creepy mask, like first of all, super creepy to have a mask left behind at a location where you think your friend might have gone missing.
Yeah,
But
it's just like, what is
also,
this?
yeah, but also could be nothing. And that's the key to these cards is like, because they don't actually mechanically make a location or a suspect any more likely, you want to make them something that injects you want to like play them as things that inject a moment of like, uh, of excitement and of like suspicion into the game, but also not make them something that's so specific that it has to do like that has to have to do with Alice, right? Like it has to be the reason why she's there or whatever. Like it's finding it's finding that balance. And that was a lot of play testing of like finding the right words here that could create a maybe that's important or maybe it's nothing.
Yeah,
That's
because
the key to those
sometimes
cards.
there's just junk left behind. You know,
Yeah, absolutely.
sometimes not everything's connected.
Yes.
Although finding a broken switchblade, oh
Yeah,
no,
like you find a broken switchblade
no.
in the barn where Alice was last
Mm,
seen, might be a big deal, right? Or it could
yeah.
have been there before and just it was, so like yeah, it definitely has that duality to it.
Yes, absolutely. So I like that. It's just a nice little prod,
At a
in
tool.
the right
Yeah.
direction to just help fuel your game a bit more. And I like very, very much enjoyed that. So we were going to next the actual cards themselves, the 90,
Yeah,
80.
the clue
Yeah,
cards.
those. Yeah, the
So I'm
cards.
gonna pull a couple of them for us to look at and go over. The first one I'm gonna pull is the 90 because that's the one that probably everybody who is facilitating the game will be getting during their game, but none of the other players will really see. Um, so yeah,
Yeah.
this one,
Keeping in mind the facilitator, it says give this card to Charlie Barnes.
yeah.
So yeah.
So if you're not playing Charlie, then, if you're as a facilitator, you're not playing Charlie, the other person will get this, which is not a big deal. It
Mhm.
just is very much a facilitator card, right? Like you're responsible for saying the first text message of the game. Prepare group text, type this out, take a moment to breathe, allow the players to get comfortable. And then when the first song on the playlist ends, send your message and begin the game. And this is something that was, I see a lot of people in the VOD going back to watch it. They're like, did Spenser forget to send the message? Like, is he just sitting? And somebody was like, he's just sitting on it. What's happening? And it's because this card requires you to wait a minute because you don't want to like start the music and then hit send and then have all the players immediately pile in. You want to give them that like, I'm waiting for my phone to go off. I'm waiting for my phone to go off. I'm waiting for it to
Like
go off. There it
that
is, right?
proverbial wait when
Yeah,
you're just like looking at your phone,
it's
like
the it's the when a roller coaster like comes over the edge of the hill and stops, that's that moment, and then it drops like at the end of the song. That's sort of the idea of behind the waiting period. It also the music allows you to sort of um, get into character, get into mood, I guess, for the game. And then once that song ends, a song that is sort of very different from the opening song kicks in and leads us into like this first act of the game that's a little more not relaxed, but a little more like we don't feel super stressed yet.
mhm.
And then once we start to get deeper into the game, like it starts to get more and more intense. So yeah, that's kind of
Yeah.
the purpose behind that one.
Yeah, I know for our gameplay you had each player select two cards
Yeah,
for the clue cards. And I know that was helpful for me because like the ones that I selected, I was like, great, I only have to really, really
remember.
pay attention to the timer at these
Yeah,
times to then drop these little bombs
right.
on
Yeah, yeah,
everybody
yeah.
else.
Well, when you play with 3 players, you have more cards than that, but it still is enough like, you still have a good amount of time
Mhm.
between each card, where you don't feel like you're constantly having to come up with stuff. You're flipping it over, you're coming up with your prompt, and then you're really letting the other players react and then seeing what their cards say as well and reacting off of that. So it's like very much a back and forth because you're always going around clockwise. So like, even if there were 3 of us, I would take the 90, you would take the 80, JB would take the 70, it come back to me, I'd take the 60. I have 30 minutes between when I
Mhm.
flip the 90 and the 60, which is
That's great.
plenty of time to be able to like feel like I'm, not to feel like I'm interacting with the game rather than flipping and having to come up with more stuff.
Right. I like that it definitely gives you like this is the group text. It's like that's what you
Yes.
said.
Uh-huh, uh-huh, yeah, yeah. It takes the pressure off of you to figure out what that first message is because you want players to go into the game confident.
Yeah.
So the more
As
you can
we
take that off. Yeah.
draw the next one,
Sure.
Matron 16 had a question about the 90 card. Is it against
Sure.
design to message individual players before the first group message is sent? We did that in our game where before everything started, we did some, I don't know if you can see it in the VOD,
You
but we
can.
did some messages. Okay, we did some messages because these people are friends. So having a type of rapport with them, even if it was just like a couple of text messages and a couple of gifts, it just kind of made a difference than starting with a blank slate and then all of a sudden there's that group
Yeah.
text message. So I actually would personally recommend to just send, a couple of silly texts to each other. Be like, hey, you have those notes from Chem Lab? Be like, yeah, somewhere. I might have
Let
left
me
it
look.
backstage.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So an
So
important thing to note there, and I totally agree, and we do that. So the reason why we specifically did it in our game was because we wanted to create rooms for each of the interactions so that you weren't creating rooms during the game. You already had them all set up on the left-hand side to make it easier. When we play, when I play, other than that, sometimes we do, sometimes we don't. But the key there is that we always uh, take that when the music starts, we don't use our phones. If you notice in that once the timer started, we weren't like typing to each other before the group text started. It was all pre-game. It was like,
Mhm.
okay, let's create the history of these characters together. And in doing that, you're not talking about Alice being missing. You're creating a prologue of what your characters might have said to each other outside of this scenario. And so if you're gonna do it, which you're more than welcome to, I've done it. I've not done it. It's great either way. It's fine either way, I should say. It works either way. But just make sure you're not messaging about her disappearance before the group text message comes in. That's the
Yeah,
main thing.
like go ahead and sit with the music, sit with the
Yeah.
intensity before it
Take that
happens.
in. Yeah.
Yeah, like that. Okay, so for the 60 that we
Yeah.
have
So
here,
this is
you want to
so
show
this
us?
is more of a standard kind of card. This is actually one of the ones that as the game starts to ramp up can be kind of can set people on edge because it says reveal a suspect card. This person shows up at your door acting suspicious. What weird question about Alice do they keep asking you?
That is nuts.
We didn't have that happen, I don't think, in our
Yeah,
game, but
we didn't.
yeah,
I
but
don't.
but
I
this
don't.
is
I don't know about other people's, but I don't remember. I don't
yeah,
remember this.
it didn't happen in ours. But this is sort of the standard format of the card, right? So there's like a three again a three like act structure to the card in a sense, or not act, but like a three segment structure. It's like you're revealing a card, you're getting the information that the card is, you're getting solid information, and then it's asking you a question. And by combining all three of those pieces of information, you're creating the prompt, or you're creating the text message, but the
Right.
prompt that you're giving the other players, right? Like I'm going to draw a suspect card real quick and just see who it is. Come here. Who is it? It is, oh, we're upside down. Stand by. It is Mr. Halvert. So Mr. Halvert shows up at your door acting suspicious. What weird question about Alice do they keep asking you? That very much informs, right? Depending on how you set up Mr. Halvert, very much informs what direction the story is going to take in that way. So like you can see how combining different characters would create different instances. And then the question that they're asking is also informed by that character and informed by the history that you've created with that character. So so yeah, this is kind of like the standard way the game plays. So I wanted to showcase it so that you have an idea of like, for those who maybe don't have access to the game yet, they can see sort of the base, like the default of how these cards work.
Yeah, and then plus, dude, what's a history teacher coming to a teenager's door
Right.
for? First
Yeah.
place, asking
Weird.
questions about Alice. That's all the way suspicious.
Yeah. Super suspicious. Cool. Should we move on to one of the more dramatic cards?
Yes. Oh,
Okay.
yes, definitely. Let's
Okay.
hit a dramatic card.
So this is one of the 30 cards. Let's see which one this is. Uh, so the 30 and 20 cards are different from the rest of the cards in the deck. We're just going to show the 30 as an example, but as you play through the game, like you just saw, you'll be pulling out suspects, you'll be pulling out locations, depending on what it asks you to draw, and they'll sort of populate the tableau on your table, whether digital or physical. So you'll have like 3 or 4 suspects, 3 or 4 locations out by the time you reach the 30 card. And then when the person who has a 30 card flips it over, it'll say something like, let's see if it pops up.
Ooh.
Yep. Shuffle the face up suspect cards and reveal one. They are the culprit. This person just posted a status on social media that turns your stomach. What did they post about Alice that makes you know they were responsible for her disappearance? So you get that sort of, again, the 3 segment structure. Some cards also have a 4th segment, which we'll talk about. And that's why these cards are a little more complex. So if you have the 30, you have the 20 card, your cards are going to be a little more complex and they're going to really dictate sort of the end state of the game. Not the entire end state, but a piece of the end state of the game. So here you would shuffle all the suspect cards that are out and reveal one, and this is the person who's responsible. And this is just an example of one of the prompts. There are other prompts in here that will lead to different things that happen. But the other key thing here is that you choose another down here. You choose another character at 15 minutes. Tell this person out of character what terrifying message the culprit sends them. That reinforces the idea that this person is responsible, right? Because like you're seeing this on social media, they're messaging that person, that character, and sending them something terrifying. Like you sort of have this at about 30 minutes, you have this culmination of like, okay, now we know who's responsible, but we still don't know where she is. So you can see like how the complexity of that card plays into the uh, the like climactic moment that's happening here during the story.
Yeah. And I realize, and thank you for this question, because I forgot to ask, what inspired the design on the backs
Oh yeah,
of
let me flip
these
over.
of the numbered cards? Um,
So
yeah.
so this is actually very like almost identical to what they were in the prototypes. And what I really liked about this design is that these cards are the ones that during the game you're the most focused on in front of you, right? These are the cards that matter the most. You need to remember the numbers because they are the key mechanic. And I think I even did it during the game. I like pinged a couple of people to be like, hey, did you turn over your 70 card? Hey, did you? And as a facilitator, every single game I have to do that with at least somebody because people get lost in their text messages and it's a compliment, right? Like to
Mhm.
me as the designer, it's a compliment that they are so invested in what's happening, they forget to look at the timer. But as a facilitator, it's your job to kind of ping them when that happens. And these cards, the way that they're designed, especially when you're playing, not so much when you're playing on Roll20 because you're not really seeing them, but when you're playing in person, what I found is that by having cards that are super bright, big blue bright back, and have leading lines straight to giant numbers.
Mhm.
When people are texting on their phones, if they move their phone to the side for a second, that's what they see. And their eye is drawn immediately to that number. And they go, shoot, is it past 40? And then they look at the clock. So when I originally had them just as numbers on a blank card, people forgot them more. But by creating something that was bright, that was bold, and that like had leading lines straight to that number, it made people, it naturally caught people's eye and reminded them organically to turn those cards at those times.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
a design that's also functional for focus. So,
Yes. So again, it's when I talk about like the half the mechanics are aesthetics in this game,
mhm.
that's an example of that, right? Like we're leading with the aesthetics there to be able to drive the gameplay.
Very nice. Okay, well, we're not going to show anything
Yeah, we're gonna
beyond
refrain.
not beyond the 30 because that's literally play the game or
Yeah.
watch the VOD
Yeah.
with things coming out because we're not going to just give everything out to y'all. This is just
Yeah.
to be able to
A little
understand
preview.
where everything is coming from, to
Yeah.
give you a really nice behind the scenes look of all these inspirations and motivations of like what Spencer, like what you went through to get it from an idea to this
A finished product.
100,
Yeah.
yeah, 100% backed on Kickstarter in 3 hours, to get it
Sure.
from there.
Sure.
So yeah, and yeah, we're gonna move on to the debrief card, and of course that brings back to the question that not always weak asked earlier, because yeah, this is such an important part of the game right now, and
Yeah.
I'm so glad that this is included within it, especially like what we were talking about at the top, allowing yourself to go vulnerable, but doing that in a safe way, and then being able to come back from that.
Yeah.
So when we get into debrief, can you also address the question by not always
Yeah.
really clear is how did you choose your safety tools and aftercare questions.
Sure. Well, we can, if we want to, we can talk about safety tools first, since those are sort of at the top of the
Yes.
game.
Mhm.
Um, so before I play, and it's in the facilitator guide in the rule book, but before I even bring anybody to the table, when I reach out about the game, I tend to go, hey, are you interested in playing this game? Just a heads up, it has, it does have thematic content about a girl that goes missing and all the sort of things that surround that. Just want to make sure that you're comfortable with that, because there are people that have real life experiences with stuff like this and just would rather not touch on that. And that's totally fine. And I think it's super important to be able to give those people the opportunity to go, I don't think this is my kind of game, because you don't want to, there's no reason to like make people feel things if they don't want to feel things. This is a
Mhm.
game about feeling things because you want to feel things,
Right.
opting in to feel things as opposed to opting out of the game when it's too late. Or when you feel like, you don't want to put people in a position where they have to feel like they opt out when they've already agreed to do it. But if you if they decide to play, when people decide to play, you always want to give them safety tools to be able to make sure that during the game, if things pop up that they didn't realize would be problems for them, because we don't always realize what's going to trigger us. You want to give them the ability to flag that and to be able to pivot, and for them to still have a great experience. And so safety tools in this, they're pretty basic. I mean, you're very much advised to use whatever works for you on top of the tools that are included. But the three that we have here are the X card, which is mostly used during the setup, and I always have it on the table during setup. But also, you know, you can have it on, we have it digitally too, so you can always X something during the game. But that's basically saying, hey, that's something I didn't realize would be a problem, but now that it's happening, I would rather it not come up during the game. This can be anything from like, I have arachnophobia, I don't like spiders, so could we not put cobwebs in the game, to something that's a little more intense. Hey, I'm going through this thing right now, I'm going through a really bad thing with a parent, or like, for example, 3 years ago my mom passed away. So like, I'm specifically, when I play games, I have to be very mindful of like, am I okay to engage with content that touches on that? And so those are tools. The X card is something, if you didn't realize something was going to impact you, or I was like, I'm fine to play with that, it's totally fine, and then it hits me the wrong way, I can like exit out to be able to, you know, have the story rotate in a different direction and just keep playing. The other one is Lines and Veils. Lines and Veils is perhaps the one that we should have talked about first, because it happens before the X card is used. But the X card is sort of the most common, so I usually lead with that. Lines and Veils are like establishing with your players beforehand, hey, I'm not cool to go here. I don't want to include, like, I won't want have anything to do with spiders. So up front, like, we're going to line spiders, no cobwebs, no fangs, no legs, nothing to do with spiders. Great. Perfect.
Yeah,
Again,
this far, no
yeah.
further.
Yeah. And again, the spider is just a
Yeah,
sort of
just a
safe
yeah.
metaphor, but you can imagine the kinds of things, that might come up for players, especially in a game like this. Veils are a little more like, hey, I'm okay if we touch on this kind of topic, but I'd rather it not be focused in depth, or if we do decide to like explore it, if we could just make sure we're cautious in that exploration, checking in on each other, making sure that we're not treating it with disregard in a sense. It usually just means it's the yellow light, right? It's like,
Mhm.
let's just be cautious if we bring this thing up and not make it the center of focus. And lastly, there's an open door policy, which is basically like, hey, if at any point you need to stop and leave for any reason, no hard feelings, no harm, no foul. You're welcome to do that. Just make sure the facilitator knows, so they can redistribute your cards, so that you don't, so you don't have like clue cards that are left open on the table. But those are sort of the core of the safety mechanics here. And then we also veil some stuff up top in the book, and you can see those veils that we apply. I think I did them on. I don't know if I did. I think I did them on the stream. I'm
I
pretty
believe
sure.
you did. I believe because I know that we had this conversation.
Yeah.
Like, yeah. So for the artwork on the back of the debrief card, which
Yeah.
this is the card that you will see at the end of everything after you've
Yeah.
gone through just the
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 ringer.
peaks and the valleys, whatever has happened in
Yeah.
your own personal Alice is Missing game, then you see this
Yeah.
first. So what was the inspiration for this artwork?
Yeah. So, I think that there's a sort of a sense of calm, a sense of peace that comes from the candle sort of artwork, that brings us back to an intimacy on a human level as opposed to like being texting together. Like, especially if you're in the same room together and I tend to, the room tends to be a little bit dim when we play. We might have a candle running. The candle reminds us of like, this is the sort of end of the game. There's a single candle burning. Originally, or not originally. Originally, I had a prototype that was a candle, and then we experimented in the final art with having a candle that was burned out and just having like smoke, which was also very thematic. But the design didn't quite the colors of that card felt a little bit muted because it was just like the color of the candle in the background, and I really loved that like play of the fire, because fire is used so thematically throughout the rest of the game. Having that one flame that's still left reminds us there's one last thing to do. So yeah, and again, a lot of this is like me interpreting later why those are the choices I made. When you make those choices in the moment, you don't always realize why you're choosing that kind of art. But
Yeah,
yeah,
I kind of feel like it feels a little like sacred, like
yeah,
taking that moment for yourself,
yeah,
type of a deal
yeah.
with it.
Doing self care for
Yeah, like
sure.
a lot of people when they light a candle, it's when they're about to pray,
Yeah.
like taking prayer. So
Oh
it's
yeah, for
kind of,
sure.
yeah, I kind of like the idea of just like taking a moment for yourself to check in with yourself to make sure you're okay.
Yeah,
So,
yeah,
but
yeah, for
yes,
sure.
see what the
Oh
debrief.
yeah. So I flipped it. So very sort of standard language up top, but it's just like take a few moments to sit with each other and then give this card to the player who played Charlie Barnes, to read the questions below. So when we play digitally, Charlie just grabs the card and reads it, right? Like or makes it big, like I did for the stream, so everybody can see it. But I think there is a sort of magic, and we kind of did it for a moment on the stream where the voicemails ended, and we just like sat there for like 10 or 15 seconds, just to like feel together for a moment before we spoke, before we returned to voice, right? So that's sort of the intention here, and then. Uh, we ask 4 questions. Originally, this was just 2 questions when I was play testing it before Big Bad Con. Before I took it to Big Bad Con to play test, it was just how do we feel? Is everyone okay? And are there any loose ends in the narrative we need to tie up? And during that game, we played it from about 8 o'clock at night to like midnight, I think. And then we had one of the players had a really intense reaction to it, and so I was lucky enough to have some wonderful players who are LARP aficionados, who had a good grasp on how they debrief during LARPs. And they stepped up during that debrief and were like, I think we need something a little more intense here. And they led us through that. And through that, I sort of gathered some other pieces. Like obviously when you have an intense game like that where somebody is it's late at night, so people's like emotions are already high. But
Right.
then we talked until 5 in the morning during that game. Like we ended at midnight, and the last person to leave was at 5 a.m. So like that was a really intense debrief, because of what happened. And so um, and again, it's really important that we do that debrief as long as it takes to make sure everybody feels okay, even if that means we sit there and talk about stuff that came up during the game or came up in ourselves. But I gathered from that big debrief a couple of pieces that I thought were really valuable to separating us from our character, because as hopefully you can attest, you fall into your character quite a bit during the game because you're hidden by that screen and because you're interacting with people in a virtual space. Oddly enough, it makes you almost feel deeper, for that. At least in my experience, I felt deeper than I have in any other game playing this game. Um, and so I wanted something to be able to give players tools to remove themselves from the character they're playing in a quick but pointed way. So that's why those other two questions were added about like, what's something you take away with you? And you're speaking in third person about your character, right? Like, what's something I take from Charlie? What's something I would leave behind from Charlie? And those allow you to look at the character from sort of an omniscient point of view, analyze their behavior, and realize it's not your own. Yeah, and some players don't need this. Some games we play, we still do it. We talk about it. It's fine, and we move on. And but it's there for players that need it. And I highly recommend you use this and anything else that works for you during your debrief.
Yeah, no, I very much enjoy that. And then yeah, and then sending a final text message to the group with your real name, changing your contacts back, like all
Yep,
of these steps. It's like almost like a
it's a
ritual
ritual.
where it's
Yep,
like to bring yourself back to yourself.
candle. The candle's
The candle,
ritualistic
it's a
too. Yeah.
ritual. Yeah. It's like bring yourself back to yourself.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Type of
Then they change everybody's names in your phone, and that sort of like, again, separates yourself on more of a tactile level, right? And
right.
returns you to reality.
Okay. Yeah. Spenser, thank you for this. This
Yeah.
is literally been a very wonderful deep dive into Alice is Missing. Is there
Yeah.
anything that we haven't covered that you would want our community to know, or
You know,
at this point, is it just get the game and play?
well, I'm really excited that we had Roll20 codes drop for everybody. So everybody now has access to the Roll20. Everybody who is a backer
Right.
during the Kickstarter who backed at the Roll20 level should have access to the game. If you don't, reach out to us, but reach out to hunters, I should say. Uh, but at this point, like, I think the main thing that I would recommend as a facilitator, and if you're watching this, I'm guessing you're probably going to be facilitating the game, is, and I note this during the Roll20 guide, but it's, the most important thing for me, and I still do it as the facilitator, is run through how you're going to play, how you're going to move your players through the setup before you get into play. You'll notice in the actual play that we did that I got everybody through that beginning prep in an hour, less than an hour, it's about 50 something minutes. Your goal should be to get players through that setup in about an hour if you can. And that just takes, like, a lot of games take DM or GM prep, right? Like, you have to like prep your adventure. You have to like, figure out what, if you're doing D&D or something, what monsters you're going to have come out, what set pieces are going to come out. For us as facilitators of this game, knowing the steps to take, knowing like the back of your hand, the steps to move them through the Roll20 setup online, or even if you're playing in person, knowing how to move them through those steps, that is our prep, because this game takes an emotional commitment and emotional energy that can be impacted if players are sitting at the table longer than like an hour and a half to do prep. So just that is, above and beyond anything, practice by yourself, like you would for any other game, running players through the Roll20 before you get them at the table.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Spenser, thank you so much for this.
Yeah.
This this has been so great.
Wild.
Now I just kind of want to play all over again.
We can make
Woo!
that happen because I made it. So we can,
Right,
I have access to it. We can do
right.
it.
I love that. Okay, so yeah, for our community out there, if you haven't already, please join our Discord. All of us are on there.
I'm
Spencer's on there. I'm
I'm
on
on it all the time. Like,
there.
I just, yeah, anything you need, hit me up.
Yeah, yeah. Hit us up on the internets, on the interwebs, on the Discord,
Yeah.
and yeah, we hope that you've enjoyed this Alice is Missing deep dive. If there are any topics that you want covered in future hunters gatherings, yeah, just let me know. Like I said on the Discord, just do that. But otherwise than that, I was talking with the creator Spenser Starke on Alice is Missing. The VOD that we keep on referencing is available on Twitch to our subscribers, and then also on YouTube. So go ahead and check it out. Maybe you're watching this on YouTube right now. Type of a thing. And yeah, Hunter's Gathering is going to be Saturdays at 6 p.m. PT or 9 p.m. ET. And we'll let you know if that day or time changes in any way, shape, or form. But we really hope to have you like come here to our fire sometime soon. And until then, we will see you next time.
Uh, I was gonna say, are we airing Alice is Missing after this? Is that happening?
Oh, yes.
Okay,
Yeah,
cool.
if you wanna hang out and stick around, we are replaying the VOD that we kept on referencing. We're playing it right after this. So you'll be able to see it from a whole new perspective, especially because you've gone through this
Yeah,
with
yeah,
like
yeah. So
with being
much.
able to see where everything comes from. So yeah,
Cool.
please enjoy if you're sticking around.
Yeah.